If you think Generation Alpha is just weird because they talk about Skibidi toilet, Rizz, or phantom tax, you're missing the entire horror story. Gen Alpha isn't just a quirky new generation with funny slang. They're the first human beings in recorded history to have their neurological, emotional, and social development fully outsourced to an algorithmic dopamine pump before their brains even know how to produce serotonin on their own. And let's get one thing straight off the top. I'm not here to wallow in parenting guilt or hand out cheap shame. Shame is a very lazy emotion. Shame makes you hide. Accountability makes you stand up. We aren't going to sit here and cry about how hard it is to parent in 2026. We're going to look at the cold, hard, psychological, and spiritual autopsy of what happens when convenience replaces presence. Welcome back to Sober Psychology. I'm Michael. I'm a psychologist in training. I'm a sober dad and someone who is thoroughly done watching society pretend that giving a 2-year-old an iPad at a restaurant is just surviving. Today we're breaking down Gen Alpha, how they were engineered, why they can't focus, why teachers are quitting in droves, and what a biblical and psychological intervention actually looks like. Grab your coffee, drop your defensiveness, and let's get sober about reality. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, Sober Psychology isn't just about staying off booze or drugs, it's about mental sobriety as well. It's about stripping away the comfortable lies, the cultural coping mechanisms, and the therapeutic sugarcoating that keeps us pacified while our homes and our minds fall apart. Now, before we dive into the deep end, let's set the ground rules for today's episode. First, this is going to be your generalization disclaimer. When psychologists, sociologists, or demographers talk about a generation, in this case, Gen Alpha, roughly those born between 2010 and 2024, we're talking about macro level statistical trends, environmental factors, and cohort behaviors. I'm not saying that your 10-year-old is a brain-rotted zombie who can't read a clock. There are incredible parents out there raising resilient, brilliant, grounded Gen Alpha kids. But if you think the systemic data, clinical psychology, and pediatric neurology is lying, you're in deep denial. Second, as we've talked about it a little bit in the previous episodes, there's a tone pivot that I'm trying to work on with this show. We've talked a lot about trauma, legacy patterns, and family dynamics, but today we're trimming the fat off of the secret shame narrative. I do not care about making you feel guilty. Guilt is self-indulgent. What I care about is truth and action. We're going to be brutally honest. We're going to use some dark humor because if you don't laugh at the absurdity of 4-year-old kids doom scrolling TikTok live streams, you'll just stare at a wall and cry. And third, we're tackling this through two unified lenses: clinical and developmental psychology lens. This is going to be neurobiology, attachment theory, executive functioning, and even behavioral psychology. And also the biblical and Christian worldview lens. This is going to talk mostly about stewardship, spiritual authority, discipline, and the moral duty of fatherhood and motherhood. If you're ready for a no-holds-barred look at the generation that's currently taken over our elementary and our middle schools, smash the like button, hit subscribe, and let's roll. All right, now let's start with what everyone sees on the surface: the culture, or rather, the complete degradation of child culture into pure, unadulterated brain rot. Every generation creates slang to differentiate themselves from their parents. Boomers had far out, Gen X had whatever, millennials had epic, Gen Z brought us no cap and bet. But Gen Alpha slang, Skibidi, gyat, Rizz, mewing, phantom tax, is fundamentally different in its origin. Previous generations created slang through social interaction, music, subcultures, and shared physical spaces. Gen Alpha's language was generated by hyper-optimized algorithms designed by software engineers in Silicon Valley to capture the gaze of a child whose prefrontal cortex was barely the size of a walnut. Just look at the neuroscience. Jean Piaget laid out the stages of cognitive development decades ago. Between ages 2 and 7, which is considered the pre-operational stage, children learn through symbolic play, physical manipulation of objects, or linguistic interaction with humans. They build blocks, and they play pretend, and they throw dirt, and they look at human faces to decode emotion. So what happens when you replace physical play and human facial interaction with half-second cuts on a high-saturation touchscreen? You trigger a massive artificial release of dopamine. When a child scrolls through short-form video feeds, the brain is flooded with dopamine at levels that evolutionary biology never prepared us for. So to protect itself from this toxic surplus, the brain down-regulates stimulates its dopamine receptors. It literally prunes them back. And the result, it's a baseline state of chronic boredom, severe irritability, and total inability to find satisfaction in low dopamine, high value activities like reading a page from a book, listening to a teacher explain long division, or waiting 30 seconds for a board game turn. You haven't just given your kid an entertaining toy, you've altered their neurochemical baseline. A 2022 study that was published in JAMA Pediatrics tracked screen time in early childhood and found direct dose-dependent correlations with deficits in executive functioning, emotional regulation, and academic performance by the age of 5. We aren't talking about mild distractions here. We're talking about the destruction of executive functioning, which is the brain's air traffic controller. Executive functioning is what allows a child to suppress an impulse, pay attention to a task, recall instructions, and self-soothe when frustrated. When a Gen Alpha kid throws a full-scale nuclear meltdown at a restaurant because you took away their iPad to order their chicken nuggets, that isn't just a tough behavioral phase. That's an addict experiencing acute withdrawal. It's neurobiological distress. And as a society, we've spent the last decade laughing it off as a cute internet meme. Now let's turn the mirror around. Gen Alpha didn't buy their own iPads. They didn't install high-speed Wi-Fi in their cribs. They were created by us, primarily millennial parents along with late Gen X. So to better understand Gen Alpha, we're going to take a look at the psychological state of the millennial parent. Millennials grew up under the tail end of authoritarian or hyper-focused helicopter parenting. Many millennials went to therapy, identified their childhood wounds, and then they said, I'll never treat my kid the way I was treated. I'll be empathetic. I'll validate emotions. I'll practice gentle parenting. The intentions are noble. The execution is catastrophic disaster. Gentle parenting, which was originally conceived by clinicians like Becky Kennedy or rooted in Diana Baumrein's authoritative parenting framework, requires two equal pillars. You've got high warmth and high boundaries. What most millennial parents actually practiced was not gentle parenting. It was permissive passivity wrapped in therapeutic jargon. Instead of holding a hard boundary with love, parents started negotiating with 4-year-olds as if they were peer mediators at a corporate dispute.
Hey buddy, I hear that you feel angry that you can't throw soup at the dog, but how can we make a better choice together?
Stop it. The child doesn't need a peer mediator. The child needs an adult. When a parent refuses to embody a calm, solid authority, the child feels insecure. Children don't want to be in charge of the household. When you make a child the emotional axis of the home, you don't build self-esteem, you build chronic anxiety. Add to this permissive passivity the ultimate tool of parental avoidance, the digital pacifier. Whenever a child feels an uncomfortable emotion, whether it be boredom, frustration, sadness, or fatigue, the parent instantly hands over a device. Here, go watch Cocomelon. Here, go play Roblox. Just be quiet. From an applied behavior analysis perspective, you're using negative reinforcement to extinguish parental discomfort while positively reinforcing the child's distress behaviors. You're conditioning your child to have a zero tolerance threshold for distress. One of my favorites on this channel, John Bowlby's attachment theory, teaches us that a secure attachment forms when a child learns that a primary caregiver can co-regulate their distress. Co-regulation means I see that you're dysregulated, I'm remaining calm, and I'm helping you ride this emotional wave, and you will survive it. When you hand a kid an iPad during a tantrum, you're not co-regulating, you're medicating. You're teaching the child that their internal state can be altered by a digital stimulus, not by human connection or internal coping mechanisms. Is it any surprise that Gen Alpha is experiencing unprecedented rates of pediatric anxiety and behavioral disorders? All right, let's move from the home to the classroom. You can ask any public school teacher right now about the state of Gen Alpha. Teachers are leaving the profession in record numbers, not just because of pay, but because of classroom management collapse. And before I get all of you in the comments, well, are you a teacher? Well, do you know? Let's go ahead and look at the hard data. First off, you've got the literacy deficit, and this is according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP. Reading proficiency scores among 9-year-olds have dropped dramatically over the past several years, hitting levels that were not seen since 1990s. A massive percentage of Gen Alpha middle schoolers can't read at grade level. Then we've got the behavioral dysregulation. Teachers are reporting that kids in the 3rd and 4th grade lack basic emotional self-regulation, such as like throwing chairs, swearing at staff, biting, and exhibiting social skills typical of toddlers. And then we've got the COVID-19 impact. We're not going to pretend that it didn't happen. Gen Alpha spent critical developmental years, ages 0 through 7, being isolated behind screens, watching masked or stressed adults, missing crucial peer-to-peer social calibration. We sold ourselves a lie 10 years ago. We said, oh, Gen Alpha are digital natives. They're so smart. Look at how they can navigate an iPhone at 18 months old. Operating a capacitive touchscreen is not a sign of intelligence. Dropping a plastic ball into a hole takes more cognitive motor skills than tapping an icon engineered by cognitive scientists to be tapped by a thumb. Swiping a screen doesn't make a kid a genius, it makes them a user. We mistook high-tech consumption for high cognitive aptitude. And in reality, while their ability to consume digital media skyrocketed, their spatial awareness, fine motor skills, reading comprehension, and social apathy plummeted. In developmental psychology, we talk about the theory of mind. This is the ability to attribute mental states like beliefs, intents, desires, emotions, knowledge to oneself and to others, and to understand that others have beliefs and desires that are completely different from our own. Theory of mind develops through real-world social friction. It develops when a kid snatches a toy on the playground, sees the other kid cry, feels the awkward social fallout, gets scolded by an adult, and adjusts their internal model of human empathy. You do not learn theory of mind from an algorithm. Algorithms don't have feelings. An algorithm doesn't care if you kick it, yell at it, or ignore it. It feeds you another video. Gen Alpha has been deprived of real-world social friction, which is resulting in a generation that's experiencing profound social atrophy and parasocial fixation. Now let's step into the spiritual dimension of this crisis, because as a Christian, as a sober man, and as a father, I refuse to look at this solely through the secular clinical lens. Psychology diagnoses the mechanism, but scripture diagnoses the heart. What's the fundamental spiritual issue driving the Gen Alpha crisis? It's the idolatry of convenience and the abdication of spiritual leadership. In Deuteronomy 6:6-7, God gives clear instruction to parents. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. Look at the structure of that command. It demands presence. It demands physical, continuous, relational immersion. You can't impress values on a child when you're staring at your phone while they're staring at theirs. Now, men, let me talk directly to the fathers for a second. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Training is an active verb. It's an athletic, intentional, daily repetition of discipline and guidance. Many fathers have abdicated their God-given role as the spiritual protector and leader of the home. They work hard. They come home exhausted. They sit on the couch. They scroll through social media or watch sports, and then they let YouTube kids do the discipleship. If you don't disciple your children, the culture will, and the culture's discipleship program is ruthless. It wants their attention, their morality, their identity, and their soul. Stop handing your children over to digital wolves because you're too tired to lead. We also need to talk about sober living in a broader sense. Sobriety isn't just about abstaining from alcohol or drugs, it's about clarity of mind. 1 Peter 5:8 tells us, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. A home saturated with digital noise, screen addiction, and unmanaged emotional chaos is a home lacking spiritual sobriety. As parents, if we're numbing our own stress with alcohol, endless scrolling, or working ourselves to death, how can we possibly teach our kids to navigate their own emotional worlds with clarity and discipline? All right, we aren't going to end this episode with a shrug and a complaint because we don't do doom pills here. If you're listening to this and you're realizing, man, I've slipped up. My kids are hooked on screens, they can't regulate, and our home feels out of control. That's good. Recognition is step one. So here's your sober, practical, psychological, and biblical roadmap to turn that ship around. Step one, this is going to be the digital detox or radical boundaries. Under the age of 2, 0, hear me again, 0 screen time, period. And this aligns with the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines. Ages 3 to 8 drastically cut short form algorithmic video content like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Roblox. If they watch content, make it long form, slow paced, and deliberate. Think classic storytelling. There are even some great kid documentaries out there. Do it on a shared living room screen, never a private handheld device. And for God's sakes, remove screens from the bedrooms and meal times. Meals are for human interaction. Bedrooms are for sleep. Step 2, re-engage physical and boredom-based play. Let your kids be bored. Boredom is the birth canal of creativity and problem solving. When your kid says, "I'm bored," don't solve it for them. Just respond with, "Hey, that's awesome. I can't wait what you figure out to do." Enforce physical play. Dirt, sports, building blocks, board games. Rebuild their fine motor skills and their spatial intelligence. Step 3, heavy emphasis on this step, implement authoritative co-regulation. Stop negotiating with toddlers like they're union representatives. Set hard boundaries with extreme composure. When a meltdown occurs, don't yell, don't hand them a phone, don't cave. Stay calm, hold the boundary, and let them feel the frustration. Frustration tolerance is a muscle that has to be built. And finally, step 4, reestablish family discipleship and presence. Sit down at the dinner table together without phones. Read scripture with your kids. Talk about character, morality, resilience, and faith. Show them what a real human being looks like when handling stress, anger, and fatigue without reaching for a digital or chemical pacifier. Generation Alpha isn't doomed. They're resilient, they're creative, and they're capable of incredible things if the adults in the room step up and act like adults. Stop blaming the kids for reacting to the environment that we built for them. Change the environment, reclaim your home, be present, stay sober, and lead your family with strength and truth. If this episode hit home, share it with a parent, a teacher, or a friend who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I try and read them all. Subscribe to Sober Psychology on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and I'll see you next week. Stay sober, stay clear, and take care. Keep your head up, keep your heart open, and go help somebody. Love you guys.